An interesting post appeared on Facebook relatively recently, emphasising a particular aspect of history that may contradict the understanding of the biblical crucifixion. According to the post, it was common practice to leave crucified victims on the cross long after death, and only take them down when the vultures had eaten them, as a sign for all those who oppose the might of Rome. They claim that this was the more likely fate of Jesus, his only ascension being in the belly of a carrion bird. Is this another lack of research by an atheist? Or have they found the crux of my faith and destroyed it in one blow? I'm not so sure, but I invite you to join me as we search for answers. Before we start, I've noticed many people have merely skipped over my long-form videos and only barely pay attention to my shorts. The shorts are good, they're punchy, but if you want a better understanding of experimental theology and my own perspective on Christendom, that's the better place to go. They may be long, they may be a while, but if you're interested in the channel, sit down with a cup of tea and enjoy the videos in their long form as best you can, or give me tips on how I can improve them. With that said, let's carry on. My main argument stems from the fact that according to the local governor, Jesus hadn't done anything wrong according to the Roman laws. If he had, it would have been more widely noted in records of the time, which we have little to show. Whilst the street preachers of Monty Python's Life of Brian is a gross exaggeration, Rome was very open to other cultures and faiths in the provinces at the time, so another peaceful, if outspoken Jew wouldn't have been much of a problem, especially with the warring factions of the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Hellenic and the Hebrew Jews. Therefore, there was little to show by leaving Jesus up on the cross, and was more likely to indicate that the governor was weak and susceptible to manipulation by the local Jews. Historians seem to be divided on if they allowed taking people down in the first place, but given the circumstances, it's possible. However, this sparked a fearsome debate with an atheist who was very determined to push this post. One of many, but he wasn't giving up easily. He mentioned that the governor, Pontius Pilate, was a brutal ruler, and was even recalled to Rome for mishandling a suspected revolt some years after Jesus was crucified. The interesting thing was that the Bible portrayed him as weak, bungling, and someone who protested against the Jews who would bring an innocent man to be executed, and was unwilling to exercise any of his prefectural powers to dismiss the charges and have Jesus freed. To reconcile this, we have to look at the history of Pilate. Professor of Christian origins, Helen Bond, mentions prefects were military leaders, not politicians or diplomats. This is proven to be the case with Pilate when upon taking his position in Judea in 26 AD, he had golden shields brought in, either as standards for his legionnaires or as frontal decoration for his home, it's unclear, which offended the local Jewish population. He was petitioned by the leaders at the time, and he refused to remove them. This threatened an uprising, which Emperor Tiberius naturally wrote to him in unpleasant tones, ordering him to send the shields to the temple of Augustus. Josephus, yes, that one, also wrote that Pilate had busts of the emperor made to display around the city, which resulted in a protest where he encircled them with his soldiers. Apparently, when they claimed they would rather die than face this insult, he relented and the statues were removed. Later, however, he was said to have taken money from the temple treasury to build a new aqueduct. This time, when the Jews protested, he had his men high in the crowd and beat them up. This shows a man with questionable statesmanship, no cultural savvy, and has later shown in how he dealt with the Samaritans, not a man to put up with any hint of rebellion. Does this mean Pilate was nothing like he's portrayed in the Gospels? Not necessarily. It shows he was uncompromising, stubborn, and not skillful in navigating the minefield of the political scene in Roman-occupied Judea. He wasn't there to handle the administrative side, but was more the chief of police, there to keep the locals in line and subservient to the empire. Much of the day-to-day business was left to the Sanhedrin, the Jewish courts, who were the ones bringing Jesus to him for punishment. Therefore, when the leaders brought Jesus for sentencing, Pilate was a bit of a fix. He had the power to free Jesus, who had done nothing wrong under Roman rule, and never raised arms against Romans or caused any fighting beyond people trying to kill him, even stopping his disciples from killing the mob who came to arrest him. He also had the temperament to kill all the Jews who were petitioning the death of Jesus. However, he was also there to maintain order, and if his conduct in previous encounters with the Jews was anything to go by, he wasn't above killing, especially if they were protesting something that would help Rome. He didn't necessarily cave due to pressure, but to ensure the empire wasn't destabilised by him letting one man go. That's what it seems like to me, at least. The only thing in the Gospels that suggests Pilate might have been given a good reason is the sign that showed Jesus' crimes. The King of the Jews. Sounds like the head of a rebellion, something for which Pilate wasn't known for letting slide. Given how he dealt with the Samaritans, with a whisper of rebellion, it would have indeed been more likely he would just send Jesus to the cross. Contemporary historian Philo of Alexandria didn't like Pilate much, stating he often executed people without trial, which involved a jury of peers, counsels of defence and prosecution, evidence and arguments. You might say that Pilate gave Jesus more of a trial than would have been expected, but all he did was ask some very simple questions, to which Jesus didn't really give an answer. In all the Gospels, he asked, "Are you the Messiah? Are you the King of the Jews?" To which Jesus said, "You say I am, but my kingdom is not on earth." He was basically telling them that they were saying it, not him, which heavily implied they were making it all up. Since they had nothing to give in evidence, Pilate saw no reason to have Jesus killed. And because he didn't have anyone stand on Jesus' behalf, it wasn't a trial, no matter what people will say. There are three things I would like to mention. Firstly, Pilate was known for taking bribes from people, as noted by Philo and Josephus. It is entirely possible that the Jews slipped him some gold to get the job done. Secondly, the Jews already tried to kill Jesus twice, and both times he slipped away. A mob wouldn't have been able to do it and claim they had done it properly. An execution was in order, and when the Sanhedrin's power limited by Rome, they needed approval from the government, clearly to avoid the wanton killing of Roman citizens who offended them. They needed to present someone to the governor and say, this person is going to cause problems for Rome. Thirdly, in John chapter 18, verse 29 to 30, they mentioned that he was a criminal, But according to the King James Bible, he was a malefactor. I find that interesting. Having examined the Greek, it seems that the term kakos literally means evil, whilst other occurrences of criminal or malefactor use the term kogorgos, which means evildoer. They're essentially calling Jesus the devil or a sorcerer. Whether this was spoken in the local, universally spoken Koine Greek, or if Pilate spoke enough Aramaic to speak to them openly, is unknown, so he can't tell if these words would mean anything to the prefect. It is likely that this was one of those reasons that he used to pass him off to the Tetrarch of Galilee, Herod Antipas, who, as a Jew, could pass better judgment on Jesus for this. Finding nothing to charge him with, he was duly sent back. The atheists I was arguing with tried to use Western culture to point out the anti-Semitic trend in the later Gospels as the church became more Roman. However, this actually goes against the Gospels, which always put the blame on the Jews. And it was only in the Gospel of John that the mob which came to arrest Jesus included Roman soldiers. Which sounds far more anti-Roman the later the Gospels go on. Even then, it was the Sanhedrin that made the judgment against Jesus. Furthermore, Britain has more Saxon, Viking and Celt than Rome. It was an interesting attempt, but a flawed one, to be honest. I might say that I'm being anti-Semitic just by reporting this, but just reporting history doesn't mean I agree with the sentiment, or that it changes my view of the modern-day equivalent. Recounting the Blitz and the aggressive tactics of the Axis powers in the early 1900s doesn't mean I want to kill all Germans. Same apply here. Just because I'm saying it looks like the Jews were more to blame for the death of Christ doesn't mean I hate Jews. Furthermore, these Jews were clearly playing fast and loose with their own laws, as any gospel reader can testify. So they can be discounted as a rogue element. Not my fault if history is unpleasant. If anything, that lends it more credence than anything at all. To get back to the point regarding Jesus being taken down and put in the tomb, does this put a better light on Pilate? Not really. Josephus claims Jesus healed Pilate's wife, but there isn't any mention of that anywhere in biblical texts. However, Pilate's role in history as a brutal man and a corrupt governor doesn't get washed away as easily as Jesus' execution, which he literally washed his hands of. Did he allow Jesus to be buried, despite the usual custom? Probably not, but we must remember whose tomb Jesus was laid in. Joseph of Arimathea, a wealthy merchant and member of the Sanhedrin. He, along with Nicodemus, another member, could have petitioned the council. The Acts of the Apostles, chapter 13, verses 28 to 29, said the council as a whole laid him in the tomb. Including verse 27. The people of Jerusalem and their rulers did not recognize Jesus, yet in condemning him they fulfilled the words of the prophets that are read every Sabbath. Though they found no proper grounds for a death sentence, they asked Pilate to have him executed. When they had carried out all that was written about him, they took him down from the cross and laid him in a tomb. Therefore, it's likely they wanted him forgotten quickly, not left up there as a sign of someone capable of making a change. This would have likely annoyed Pilate, but since he was their convict and merely another street preacher to the Romans, he wasn't their problem. Gold could have been passed to him again, but there's no point speculating again, is there? And before anyone mentions the breaking of legs, which is commonly used to bring down a person a lot quicker, the soldiers pierced Jesus' side with a spear to check if he was truly dead. Quicker and cleaner than smashing legs. Ultimately, Jesus wasn't a criminal in the eyes of Rome, so whilst he was given a Roman execution, there's no reason to think he was left up there to be eaten, but taken down and buried in the tomb. A tomb which is now empty. But let's give them the benefit of the doubt here. What if Pilate saw Jesus as a threat and therefore had him crucified? Unfortunately, we still have Joseph of Arimathea, Nicodemus, and the rest of the council having him buried, which heavily implies gold had been exchanged, not against Pilate's nature. Also, if the Gospels were being written in a way that exonerated Pilate or any member of the Roman army at the time, of the Roman government, the ones who had had the influence to do so at that time would have again been Joseph of Arimathea. Since he died in 45 AD, this would have put the early anti-Jewish Gospels much earlier into the 1st century, when Joseph was still around. So far from smashing the story of Jesus, this gives it way more credence. I'll be honest, I was wondering if this could very well be the thing that breaks my faith. Because in order for there to be a resurrection, Jesus had to have been buried in the tomb. Whilst in some parts of the Old and New Testament we can be loose about the timings and so forth, the Easter period, particularly around that time, was very specific, and we can't deny the body of Jesus had to be removed before the vultures had their fill. That would have taken more than a few days, and the bones wouldn't necessarily have been given the same funeral rites. I know people will think this is me desperately searching, but I took the time, and as my rules of experimental theology stipulate, I played devil's advocate. Checked to see if there's anything that could potentially give them any reason to believe this, or anything that could imply that it was true, and I still see no way in which this could be the case. The Bible had a relatively accurate account of this. But when anyone plays the probability card, which is very fine, I'll admit, if it happened, it happened. Argue the odds all you want, but since you don't put up with that in the anti-evolution crowd, it's not going to wash here either. This showed the lengths that people will go to, and quite often stop in regards to their research, even resorting to flawed personal attacks. It's not a pleasant thing to be the one to dig around and find the pieces that they are refusing to look for, especially when it could potentially question your faith. But someone's got to do it. And that's what my channel is here for. That's what it's all about. So subscribe if you want to see more of this sort of thing. I think there's a few more of those coming. Thank you for watching. Stay safe. And God be with you, my friends.